Captain Threx hated alarms, not because they were loud. Hell, after years in the Planetary Defense Corps, he was practically deaf in one ear. It was because alarms meant some poor sap had probably screwed up. Again. "What's it this time, Jenkins?" Threx barked over the comm. Jenkins, the ever-optimistic tech officer, sounded unusually jittery. Captain, you might want to see this. Shield walls acting. Peculiar, peculiar. Like a cat in a sweater, peculiar, or more of it, we're all gonna die peculiar. Closer to the second one, sir, Threx sighed. The shield wall was Earth's last defense, a cosmic condom keeping all the nasty little space STD from infecting home sweet home. Meet me in control room A, and bring coffee. Strong enough to melt steel. The corridors of the orbiting defense station were cramped and smelled faintly of burnt ozone and human desperation. A great place to spend your twilight years. Threx liked to think of himself as a glorified janitor, sweeping the stars for threats instead of trash. In Control Room A, the holographic display was indeed peculiarly lit. A visualization of Earth's shield wall shimmered like a drunk at last call, flickering ominously. Jenkins hovered nervously, clutching two steaming mugs of something vaguely resembling coffee. "Ah, Jenkins, you bring offerings," Threx said, accepting the mug with a nod. "Now, tell me why our shield's having a seizure." Jenkins pointed at a cluster of red dots swirling on the display like angry bees. "There's a fluctuation in the power grid." Fluctuation. That's a fancy way to say we're screwed, isn't it? Threx took a sip of his coffee, grimacing as it scalded his tongue. "What's causing it? Please tell me it's not another asteroid with delusions of grandeur." "No, sir, it's internal. Some kind of systemic failure." "Perfect. Earth's most advanced piece of tech, and it's having an existential crisis." "There's more, sir," Jenkins added, hesitating. "The wormhole network's getting jittery too." The wormholes were Earth's umbilical cord to the universe, linking their little blue rock to essential resources and the occasional alien delicacy. If those went down, Earth would be as isolated as a hermit on a mountain, minus the Enlightenment. Threx set his mug down with a clink, staring at the holographic chaos. "Okay, Jenkins, if the shield wall collapses and the wormholes go belly up, Earth's got about as much chance as a snowball in hell. Time to call in the experts." "Do we have any experts, sir?" Threx shrugged. "We'll find out. Get me Commander Voss on the line." As Jenkins fiddled with the comms, Threx mulled over the prospect of Earth's isolation. He imagined a future where humanity had to rely on its own meager resources. It was an apocalyptic vision of canned beans and reruns of ancient sitcoms. Commander Voss's hologram flickered to life, looking as grumpy as a bear woken mid-hibernation. "Threx, what fresh hell have you dragged me into this time?" "Oh, just the usual existential threat," Threx replied with a grin. "Shield walls on the fritz," Voss groaned. "Tell me you've got a plan. Plans are for people who don't have enough panic in their lives. I'm more of a wing it and pray kind of guy." "Well, you better start praying hard," Voss said, eyes narrowing. "The council's going to want answers, and I'm fresh out of excuses." "Yeah, well, they can take a number. Right now I need solutions, not more bureaucracy." The conversation was interrupted by another alarm, this one shriller and more insistent, as if trying to outdo its predecessor in sheer annoyance. "What now?" Threx groaned, glancing at Jenkins. Jenkins checked his console. "Looks like a breach in Sector 12. "Wonderful, just what we needed, a hole in our cosmic condom." "Voss, I'll get back to you after we plug this leak." Voss nodded. "Don't take too long, we're running out of time and patience." Threx cut the comms and motioned to Jenkins. "Grab your toolkit, we're going on a field trip." The breach in Sector 12 was as ugly as expected, a vast chasm in the shield, pulsating with energy and misfortune. Bits of space debris were already making themselves at home, like freeloading relatives at a family reunion. Jenkins was on it, tools in hand, muttering to himself in a language that only tech officers and the clinically insane could understand. "You know, Jenkins," Threx said, keeping one eye on the breach, "if this doesn't hold, we'll be up to our necks in alien invasions." No pressure then, Jenkins replied dryly. Oh, none at all. Just the collective fate of humanity resting on your shoulders. But hey, no big deal. Jenkins soldered some wires together with a flourish. Think that should do it, sir. The breach flickered, then gradually sealed itself, leaving no trace of its existence. Nice work, Threx said, clapping Jenkins on the back. Guess we won't have to resort to cannibalism just yet. As they made their way back to control, Threx couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The shield wall might be patched, but the wormhole network was still a ticking time bomb. Jenkins, any word on those wormholes? Still unstable, sir. Could go any minute. Great. As if we didn't have enough problems. Threx settled back into his chair, the weight of the universe pressing down on him. Jenkins, remind me why we signed up for this. To protect Earth and all its precious, ungrateful inhabitants, Jenkins replied in a sing-song voice. Threx chuckled. Right. I must have been drunk. He steeled himself, knowing the real work was just beginning. Earth's survival teetered on a knife edge, and there was no telling which way it would fall. Let's get to work, Threx said, the gravity of their situation sinking in. We've got a planet to save. As if on cue, another alarm blared, signaling yet another crisis. And the universe never lets up, Threx muttered, grabbing his mug like a lifeline. Here we go again. Captain Threx had barely settled back into his chair when the universe decided to throw another curveball. The universe was funny like that, always had a way of sneaking up on you with a crowbar when you least expected it. The holographic display showed Earth surrounded by a network of wormholes, each dancing nervously like a cat on a hot tin roof. Then, as if someone had just pulled the cosmic plug, they all blinked out of existence. Well, don't that just beat all, Threx muttered, not so much surprised as mildly annoyed. He'd seen this coming. Probably. Though he'd been hoping for divine intervention or at least a delay long enough to finish his coffee. Jenkins was staring at his console, fingers twitching like they were trying to communicate in Morse code. Sir, the wormhole network, it just collapsed. We're cut off from the galaxy. Wonderful. Who needs friends, right? Threx said, more to himself than anyone else. Guess it's time to turn Earth into a self-sustaining paradise. You know, after we solve world hunger and get everyone to agree on pizza toppings. Panic was the order of the day, and it was served up in generous portions. Alarms were blaring, people were shouting, and the entire station was buzzing with the frantic energy of a beehive on fire. Threx rubbed his temples and sighed. He could practically feel a migraine setting up camp in his brain, and it wasn't even lunchtime yet. Jenkins, get everyone in here. We need to sort this mess out before Earth goes full Mad Max. Jenkins nodded and started sending out urgent summons. Who do you want, sir? Our experts are a bit thin on the ground. Whoever's still sober and capable of forming sentences, Threx said. And maybe a few who aren't. Desperate times and all that. Within minutes, a motley crew began to assemble in Control Room A. First to arrive was Dr. Ilara Fizz, a biologist with a penchant for sarcasm and an allergy to bullshit. She was followed by Lieutenant Drax, a grizzled veteran who communicated mainly in grunts and expletives, and then by Philo, a civilian engineer whose fashion sense suggested he got dressed in the dark. All right, team, Threx said, feigning enthusiasm like a used car salesman pitching a lemon. Our shield wall went wobbly, the wormholes are toast, and if we don't figure something out, Earth's going to be more isolated than a germaphobe at a sneeze convention. Fizz adjusted her glasses, peering at the holographic display. Is it too soon to start hoarding canned goods? Probably should have started yesterday, Threx replied. But I'm hoping we can avoid that if we put our heads together. Drax, arms crossed and expression best described as thunderous, grunted. We're stuck in a death trap. What's the plan? Good question, Threx said, giving a wild-eyed glance around the room. Anyone got a plan that doesn't involve panicking or lotteries for who gets eaten first? Philo raised a hand, hesitantly stepping forward. We could try recalibrating the station's power grid to stabilize the wormhole generators. That sounds suspiciously like a solution, Threx said, raising an eyebrow. Are you sure you're in the right meeting? Philo shrugged. No promises, but it might work. If nothing else, it'll delay total collapse. Delay is good, Threx said, clapping his hands together. Delay means we might make it to Happy Ior. Fizz smirked. I don't think delay is on the council's list of acceptable outcomes. Yeah, well, I stopped caring about their list when they installed that automated coffee machine, Threx replied. Let's give this a shot. Jenkins, who had been furiously making notes, looked up. Should I get the communications array back online too? We need to reach some allies, assuming they even exist anymore. Do it, Threx said. I want to be able to call for help when this half-baked plan inevitably goes sideways. Drax grunted in what might have been agreement. I'll prep a security team in case we get visitors. Visitors? Fizz arched an eyebrow. What, like extraterrestrial Girl Scouts? More like extraterrestrial invaders, Drax shot back. His smile was more of a grimace, but it was the thought that counted. With their dubious plan in place, the team scattered to their respective tasks. Threx found a corner of the room where he could sit and watch the chaos unfold, like a spectator at a particularly disastrous circus. People rushed back and forth, consoles beeped and buzzed, and somewhere in the background, an alarm played a melody of impending doom. Threx took a sip of his coffee, now cold and bitter as his mood. Remember when we signed up for this thinking it was all glory and heroism? He asked no one in particular. Jenkins, returning with a fresh stack of reports, paused. Glory's overrated, sir. Give me a working coffee machine any day. You and me both, Jenkins, Threx said. You and me both. Ior's passed with all the speed of a glacier caught in quicksand. The wormhole recalibration was underway, involving more spliced wires and crossed fingers than anyone was comfortable with. Meanwhile, the communication array sputtered back to life, offering the faintest hope of contact with Earth's allies, or anyone else who might care. Philo emerged from a tangle of cables, looking like he just battled an angry octopus. Captain, we've stabilized the power grid as best we can. Wormholes should be functional, but they won't last forever. Functional's good, Threx said. Better than nothing. Let's see if anyone's out there. Jenkins tapped a few commands into his console, and the communication array hummed ominously. Initiating first contact protocol, he announced, as if they were making a blind date call to the void. Sending out distress signals now. Threx leaned back and waited, hoping the universe would cut them some slack. His fellow humans, scattered across the cosmos, might just have a few heroic bones left in their bodies. Or maybe they'd be too busy dealing with their own crises to answer. Minutes ticked by, each one longer and more silent than the last. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made your skin itch and your mind wander to all the worst possible outcomes. Finally, the console beeped, signaling an incoming message. Jenkins was on it in a flash, fingers flying over the controls. We've got a response, Jenkins said, breathing a sigh of relief. It's from the Boraxian Alliance, but the connection's unstable. Boraxians, Threx muttered. Great. Just what we need, more bureaucracy. The Boraxians were allies, sort of. More like distant relatives who only showed up for the good parts, like inheriting money or eating cake. The screen flickered to life with the face of a Boraxian ambassador, who looked like a cross between a toad and a tax accountant. Captain Threx, the ambassador croaked, we received your distress signal. Yeah, we're in a bit of a bind, Threx said, trying to sound casual, as if he wasn't sitting on the last line of defense before Earth turned into a galactic afterthought. Wormhole networks down. Could use a hand. The ambassador blinked slowly, which in Boraxian meant they were thinking or possibly just napping. The collapse of your wormhole network poses a significant logistical challenge. That's one way to put it, Threx replied dryly. Got any spare fleets lying around, or are we on our own here? We will require time to organize a response, the ambassador said, their voice oozing with the kind of unhelpful diplomacy that made Threx yearn for a simpler time, like the Stone Age. In the meantime, we suggest consolidating your resources and preparing for further isolation. Consolidate and prepare. Got it, Threx said, his patience wearing thinner than cheap toilet paper. We'll be sure to do that while we wait for your arrival. The ambassador gave a slow nod like they were bestowing a great favor. We will contact you once we have further developments. Boraxian Alliance out. The screen went dark, leaving behind an aura of unresolved tension and the faintest hint of toad slime. Well, that was as helpful as a chocolate teapot, Fizz said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Threx rubbed his chin thoughtfully. They'll come through. Eventually. In the meantime, we need to keep things running here. Jenkins looked around, his optimism a little battered but still intact. So, what's next on the agenda? Threx considered the question. If there was one thing he'd learned over the years, it was that leadership was mostly about pretending you had a clue. But for now, he had a plan, or the rough sketch of one at least. We keep the wormholes stable, get the shield wall fully operational, and pray to whatever gods are listening, Threx said. And if they don't listen, we'll just have to yell louder, or bribe them with better coffee, Fizz added, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Drax, who had been leaning against the wall like a particularly irritable statue, finally spoke. We should start rationing supplies. If we're cut off, things could get ugly fast. Ugly's an understatement, Threx said. But you're right. Let's make sure there's enough to go around. As the team busied themselves with their tasks, Threx took another sip of his cold coffee. It was bitter, unpleasant, and exactly what he needed. Remember, team, he said, raising his mug in a mock toast, if we save the day, drinks are on me. And if we don't, Jenkins asked. Threx grinned. Then we probably won't have to worry about it. The room filled with a dark kind of laughter, the only kind they had left. The station buzzed with activity as the team worked tirelessly, each aware of the stakes hanging over their heads like a guillotine. The wormhole network flickered, the shield wall hummed, and alarms occasionally reminded them that the universe was in no hurry to cut them any slack. Threx stood by the holographic display, watching the planet they were sworn to protect. Earth, fragile and blue, spun silently in the void, blissfully unaware of the cosmic chaos encircling it. All right, he said, addressing his crew with a renewed determination. Let's save ourselves a planet. And with that, the station braced for whatever came next, a universe of uncertainties and the faint hope that, for once, things might just go their way. The control room was buzzing, a hive of human activity and misplaced optimism. Threx paced like a trapped animal, which wasn't far from the truth. The shield wall, Earth's last line of defense, was on its last legs, sputtering more than a drunk at last call. The wormholes might be functional for now, but if the shield gave out, they'd be about as useful as a parachute on a submarine. Anyone got an aspirin? Threx said, rubbing his temples. Feels like my head's got its own apocalypse going on. Fizz, nose buried in a tablet displaying shield schematics, didn't look up. Try banging your head against the console. I hear blunt trauma's a great cure for everything these days. Thanks, Doc. I'll keep that in mind for Plan C, Threx replied, grinning despite himself. Jenkins, ever the diligent worker ant, cut in. Captain, the shield's losing integrity fast. If we don't stabilize it soon, we might as well be waving a welcome flag. Fantastic, Threx muttered. Any ideas that don't involve praying or sacrificing a goat? Drax let out a gravelly chuckle. Could always try duct tape. Works on most things. Yeah, maybe if we duct tape the whole damn planet, Threx said, but his mind was already ticking over, wheels turning as he considered the next move. Actually, there might be something to that. Not the duct tape, but... His eyes lit up with the kind of inspiration that was equal parts genius and madness. Ancient Earth tech. Fizz finally looked up, eyebrows raised. You mean like spears and fire? Because I'm not sure how that'll help against a cosmic implosion. No, Threx said, excitement creeping into his voice. Back in the days when we still had regular power outages, people used these massive transformers and, what were they called? Power converters. We could jury-rig something similar to boost the shield's power for a bit. Dredging up the past to save the future, Jenkins mused. Classic human move. Fizz tapped a finger against her chin, considering. Might work, assuming we can find the parts and don't blow ourselves up in the process. Details, details, Threx said with a wave of his hand. Let's get scavenging. Drax, you and Jenkins see what you can find in the storage bays. Fizz, you and I will hit the maintenance decks. With a collective groan that echoed the station's own weary creaks, the team split up, each heading into the bowels of the station where the smell of burnt ozone was strongest. The corridors were narrow and dimly lit, making them feel like rats scuttling through a maze, except this maze came with the delightful possibility of annihilation. Remind me why I'm here again, Fizz asked, stepping over a bundle of cables that seemed to serve no discernible purpose other than tripping unsuspecting crew members. Because you're a glutton for punishment, Threx suggested. Or maybe you just like my charming company, Fizz snorted. Charm's not the word I'd use, but fine, let's pretend there's a plan here. They descended a set of rickety stairs to the maintenance decks, which were even more claustrophobic than the corridors. Rusted shelves lined the walls, filled with unidentifiable bits of machinery and a generous coating of neglect. Threx grabbed a flashlight from his belt and flicked it on, the beam cutting through the gloom. All right, let's find ourselves some relics of a bygone age. As they picked their way through the shelves, sifting through the detritus of past expeditions and forgotten projects, Threx couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here they were trying to patch together the future with the scraps of the past, like some kind of cosmic junkyard sale. Fizz found a box and yanked it open, coughing as a cloud of dust assaulted her lungs. If we don't die from an alien invasion, the tetanus might get us first, she said, eyes watering. Occupational hazard, Threx said, poking through another pile of debris. Ah, look. A power converter. He held it up triumphantly. Fizz gave it a skeptical once-over. That looks more like a paperweight than a lifesaver. Same difference, Threx said, tucking it under his arm. Let's keep going. We need more if we're going to MacGyver our way out of this. Back in control room A, Jenkins and Drax returned with their own armfuls of salvaged gear, looking like they'd raided a scrapyard. Found some stuff, Jenkins announced, dumping the load onto a table. Hope it's not all junk, Drax shrugged. Even if it is, junk's what we need right now. Threx gathered the team, looking at the motley collection of components. All right, folks, let's put these pieces together and hope we don't blow ourselves to kingdom come. With the desperation of people who had everything to lose and nothing to gain but a temporary reprieve from disaster, they set to work. The room filled with the sounds of clanking metal, the sizzle of soldering tools, and the occasional curse as someone nicked a finger or zapped themselves. Careful there, Jenkins, Fizz said, glancing at the younger officer as he wrestled with a particularly stubborn wire. Wouldn't want you to get fried before you've paid back your student loans. Jenkins just grinned, sweat beading on his forehead. If we survive this, I'll worry about the loans. If not, well, at least they can't collect from the grave. Threx tightened a bolt, nodding along. That's the spirit. Morbid optimism. The atmosphere was tense, like a rubber band stretched to its limit, but the dark humor and camaraderie kept them from snapping. They were a team forged in the fires of impending doom, after all. Or was it insanity? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stepped back to admire their handiwork. A Frankenstein's monster of technology, cobbled together from spare parts and sheer stubbornness. Well, Threx said, hands on hips, nothing left to do but flip the switch and see if we live to regret it. Fizz crossed her arms, eyeing the contraption warily. Here's hoping it doesn't just explode spectacularly. Threx gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. If it does, I'll take the blame. How generous of you, Fizz replied dryly, though there was a hint of a smile lurking around the corners of her mouth. Standing beside the control panel, Threx took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the activation switch. All right, people, here goes nothing. He flipped the switch, and the room held its collective breath. The humming started softly, a low vibration that gradually increased in intensity. For a terrifying moment, nothing else happened and Threx's heart sank. But then the shield wall's status lights began to flicker, stabilizing as the patchwork power boost kicked in. "It worked," Jenkins said, awe and disbelief coloring his voice. "Of course it did," Threx said, though he was as surprised as anyone. "Never doubted us for a second." The room erupted into relieved laughter, the kind that comes when you realize you've somehow defied the odds. They'd bought themselves some time, however fleeting. Drax, who had been uncharacteristically silent, gave a rare smile. "Guess we won't be packing it in just yet." Fizz shook her head, a mixture of exasperation and admiration in her eyes. "You know, this might actually be your most ridiculous plan to date." Threx raised an eyebrow. "Most ridiculous or most brilliant?" "The line's a little blurry," Fizz admitted, "but I'll give you credit for pulling it off." "Well then," Threx said, clapping his hands together, "let's keep this momentum going. Jenkins, monitor the shield's integrity. Drax, double-check our stockpile and make sure we don't run out of essentials. Fizz, see if there's anything else we can do to keep this tin can from falling apart." As the team dispersed, Threx allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They'd managed to stave off disaster for a little longer, and that was no small feat. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the real challenges were yet to come. The universe had a way of throwing curveballs, and Threx had the distinct impression it wasn't done with them yet. But for now, at least, they'd managed to hold the line. And in a universe where chaos reigned supreme, that was as close to a victory as they were likely to get. Captain Threx stood in Control Room A, staring at the holographic display of Earth ringed by the flickering remnants of the once mighty wormhole network. The shield wall flashed like a dying light bulb. He felt like a janitor trying to unclog a cosmic toilet, one plunger stroke at a time. His headache had not improved, and the station's air smelled like a burnt-out circuit board left to cool in a dumpster fire. "All right," Threx said, rubbing his temples. "Just when we thought we could enjoy our victory in peace, the universe decides to throw a curveball. More like a flaming, spiky, radioactive curveball," Jenkins muttered, tapping frantically at his console. "I'm picking up an unexpected meteor shower heading right for us." "Perfect," Threx groaned. "As if we needed more reasons to hate space. What's next?" "Space pirates, alien tax collectors," Fizz chuckled, her eyes still glued to her tablet. "Always thought space was overrated. Now I know it's actively trying to kill us." Drax, arms folded like a brick wall with a military haircut, grunted. "Let's just hope our patchwork shield fix holds long enough to avoid starring in a cosmic fireworks show." "Great plan," Threx said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "Rely on luck and hope." The console beeped insistently, and the hologram displayed the incoming meteor shower, a chaotic dance of celestial debris hurtling toward them at breakneck speeds. It was the universe's way of reminding them that it wasn't done playing roulette with their lives just yet. "All right, people," Threx shouted, clapping his hands to galvanize the crew. "Time to see if our jigsaw puzzle shield can handle an actual hit. Fizz, keep an eye on those power levels. Jenkins, monitor the shield integrity and yell if it starts to crumble like a cheap cookie." "Roger that," Jenkins replied, his fingers a blur across the controls. Fizz nodded, her usual sarcastic bravado replaced by focused determination. "I'll try not to let us down, but no promises." This thing's held together by dreams and duct tape. The meteor shower descended with all the subtlety of a surprise punch to the face. The room shuddered with each impact, a cacophony of metal groaning under the strain. Lights flickered, and alarms blared incessantly, like a particularly obnoxious concert of impending doom. "Shields holding," Jenkins shouted over the din, though his voice held more hope than certainty. "For now," Threx muttered. "Keep it together, people. We're not out of the asteroid belt yet." Drax, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward. "We need to redistribute the power more efficiently. Could give us a few more minutes of shield juice." "How do we do that?" Threx asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The control room felt like a pressure cooker moments from exploding. Fizz gestured to the spaghetti of wires and components they'd cobbled together earlier. With a little creative engineering, assuming you can even call this engineering, Jenkins, ever the overachiever, dove into the tangled mess like a man possessed. Lucky for you, I minored in what the hell are we doing? Threx watched as Jenkins and Fizz worked in tandem, hands moving with precision that belied the chaos surrounding them. It was like watching a pair of mad scientists trying to revive Frankenstein's monster during an earthquake. Drax barked out instructions, his voice a stabilizing force amidst the chaos. Reroute the power from non-essential systems. Life support, comms, anything we can spare. Threx nodded, the logic part of his brain applauding Drax's cold calculus. Good thinking. Let's hope we don't need to call for backup or, breathe. As the meteors continued their relentless assault, Threx marveled at his team's resilience. Against all odds, they were holding the line, improvising with the kind of reckless ingenuity only humans could muster. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," Threx whispered to the shield, willing it to hold as the station shuddered again. Just a little longer. Jenkins, sweat glistening like dew on a nervous forehead, glanced up with a grin. "Powers redistributed, we should have a few more minutes." "You're a bloody miracle worker, Jenkins," Threx said, clapping him on the back. Fizz's eyes narrowed, a spark of mischief cutting through her concentration. "What's the matter, Threx? Afraid we'll actually pull this off?" He barked a laugh. "Wouldn't be surprised if we did. Humans are too stubborn to admit defeat." The station continued to shake, but the impacts felt less dire now, the shield absorbing the blows with renewed vigor, a patched-up hero facing the final act. "Keep an eye on those readings, Jenkins," Drax cautioned. "I don't want any surprises." Jenkins nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm on it. But if we survive this, I think I'll finally take that vacation. Maybe somewhere less explosive." Fizz snorted, the sound a welcome relief. "Good luck finding that place. Maybe a nice, quiet black hole." Threx grinned, feeling the tension in the room ease ever so slightly. "Don't forget to send us a postcard, Jenkins." Another shudder, and the meteor shower began to wane, the debris field dispersing as quickly as it had appeared. The room fell into a stunned silence, the alarms mercifully quiet. "We did it," Threx said, disbelief mingling with triumph. "The damn thing held." A cheer went up, ragged and exhausted but genuine. It was the sound of survival, of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Drax let out a long breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours. "Looks like we get to live another day." Fizz leaned back, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "Don't get too comfortable. The universe is just biding its time." "Yeah, well, let it wait," Threx said, a grin tugging at his lips. "We've earned ourselves a breather." The crew dispersed, each member attending to their duties with a newfound sense of purpose. They were battered, bruised, but unbroken, a testament to human tenacity. Threx watched them go, feeling a swell of pride tinged with the ever-present undercurrent of dread. They'd passed the test, but the universe had no shortage of surprises. Still, they'd shown that when push came to shove, they could shove right back. As he turned back to the holographic display, Threx allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The shield was holding, the station was intact, and his crew was still in one piece. It wasn't victory, but it was enough for now. "Well, Captain," Drax said, breaking the silence. "What's the plan?" Threx shrugged, casting a sidelong glance at his grizzled lieutenant. "Same as always. Survive, adapt, and keep flipping off the universe." Drax chuckled, a rare sound that rumbled like distant thunder. "Not a bad motto, could do worse." Threx's gaze drifted back to the stars beyond the shield, a vast expanse of dark possibilities. His headache had faded, replaced by a sense of determination. They'd face whatever came next together. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with a few laughs to spare. After all, if the universe insisted on being a cosmic joke, they might as well laugh along with it. The control room felt hotter than a sunbather on Mercury as the crew busied themselves with the aftermath of the meteor shower. Captain Threx, sweat beading on his forehead, couldn't shake the eerie calm that settled like a storm-bred stillness. The shield's pulse was weaker than a pacifist's handshake, and he knew the universe wasn't done tossing them into chaos just yet. "Jenkins, how's our beloved shield holding up?" Threx asked, not expecting good news. Jenkins, with the enthusiasm of someone trying to reschedule a root canal, glanced at the monitor. "Oh, it's doing great, Cap. If by great you mean it's about as stable as a politician's promise." "Splendid," Threx grumbled. "Just what we needed. A total collapse." Drax, standing by the door with the posture of an insomniac owl, grunted. "We've patched it more times than a barfly's liver." "Not surprised it's failing." Fizz leaned over her console, her face lit by the ghostly glow of her tablet. "Well, look on the bright side. If it collapses completely, we won't have to worry about retirement plans." The crew exchanged weary glances, a silent agreement that gallows humor was all that kept them from screaming into the void. Threx rubbed his temples, trying to massage away a headache that felt like a jackhammer with a vendetta. "Earth's getting the worst of it," Jenkins said, his voice edged with concern. "Reports are coming in. Looks like someone kicked the anthill." The holographic display bleeped, showing a chaotic ripple effect. Earth, vulnerable and sprawling, with patches of darkness where the shield's protection had failed. Debris from the meteors hadn't just tickled the atmosphere, it had sucker-punched the surface. "Great," Threx muttered. As if Earth needed any more scars, Drax peered at the display. "Didn't figure Earth would need its own set of craters to match the moon. Always was one for symmetry," Fizz snorted. "Well, at least we're not there to see it. Just a nice, safe view from orbit." "You know, until we crash." Threx was silent, a thousand thoughts colliding in his mind like a chain reaction. Every bit of training, every ounce of experience told him they were outclassed, outgunned, and possibly out of time. Hope was about as scarce as a friendly space pirate. "Right," Threx said, his voice more resigned than hopeful. "We need inspiration. And since I'm not about to give a rousing speech, let's steal from Earth's history." Fizz raised an eyebrow. "History? The same history with wars, plagues, and bad fashion choices." Threx nodded. "That one. Earth's been through worse. We've got to channel a little resilience." Jenkins perked up, leaning back in his creaky chair. "You mean like that time they glued the Statue of Liberty back together?" Threx shrugged. "Something like that. Humans are idiots, but we're stubborn idiots. If there's a way out of this mess, we'll find it." Drax rolled his eyes. "I'd settle for a way to keep this bucket of bolts from becoming a cosmic speed bump." A sudden, sharp tremor rattled Control Room A, and the lights flickered ominously before stabilizing. The holographic display fizzled, momentarily losing its grasp on reality before snapping back into focus. Threx cursed under his breath, his stomach doing cartwheels. "Looks like the shield's having a midlife crisis," Jenkins said dryly. "Maybe it's time for a rebrand." Fizz's hands danced across her tablet, her focus laser-sharp. "We need to redistribute the power again. Fast. Otherwise, we'll be picking pieces of this station out of our teeth." The room erupted into a flurry of activity, each crew member a cog in the machine of desperate survival. Threx watched as they worked, a silent prayer rattling around in his mind like a loose screw. Drax moved to assist, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos. "We've got enough power to keep the essentials running," he said. "Barely. Good. Let's divert what we can to the shield," Threx ordered. "Keep this tin can afloat a little longer." Jenkins' fingers flew across his console, a blur of motion and purpose. "All right, people, time for some good old-fashioned improvisation. Let's make Mac Jiver proud." The crew worked with frantic determination, fear and fatigue etched into their faces. Fizz monitored the power levels like a hawk with a caffeine addiction, while Drax barked orders with military precision. Jenkins juggled tasks like a circus performer on a particularly bad day. "Cap, we're running on fumes," Jenkins said, voice strained. "But we've got a few more minutes of shield juice." Threx nodded, relief tempered by the ever-present threat of disaster. "It'll have to do. Let's just pray the universe takes a coffee break." Outside, the cosmos was a dark carnival of spinning planets and distant stars, oblivious to the human drama unfolding within the station. The shield flickered, its glow erratic and wavering like a candle in the wind. Drax, ever the realist, folded his arms. Got any more brilliant ideas, Captain? Or are we just here for the views? Threx chuckled, the sound more bitter than sweet. Working on it. But hey, at least the odds of getting abducted by aliens are pretty low right now, Fizz snickered. I dunno, Captain. I hear alien tax collectors are pretty persistent. Jenkins chimed in, grinning despite himself. Yeah, but do they accept intergalactic credit in the face of oblivion? Humor was their weapon of choice. It was a fragile shield, but it was theirs. As the moments stretched like taffy, the crew continued to work, a symphony of human tenacity and ingenuity. Threx watched them, a grudging admiration blooming in his chest. Against all odds, they were still fighting, still refusing to go quietly into that good night. It wasn't much, but it was enough. All right, Threx said, clapping his hands to draw their attention. Let's keep at it. I want this station in one piece by the time we're done, or at least close enough that it looks like one. Jenkins saluted with 2 fingers, a mockery of formality. Aye, Captain. One intactish station coming right up. Fizz nodded, her expression a mix of determination and mischief. Wouldn't have it any other way. Just another day at the office, right? Threx smiled, the gesture small but genuine. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Well, except maybe a vacation. Drax snorted. Good luck with that. We'll be lucky if we get a lunch break. The control room buzzed with the electric hum of machinery and the whispered tension of a crew on the edge. Each minute felt like an ire, each decision a gamble with stakes too high to contemplate. And yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there was hope. Fragile, fleeting, but undeniable. It was the thread that bound them together, the light in the dark. As the station rocked gently under another wave of cosmic interference, Threx found himself thinking of Earth. The planet might be battered and bruised, but it was still standing, a testament to the stubborn, stupid resilience of humanity. Keep it together, folks, Threx said, his voice a rallying cry. We're not done yet. The crew nodded, a silent promise shared between them. They would stand, they would fight, and they would endure, for as long as it took. Jenkins looked up from his console, a crooked grin on his face. You know, if we survive this, I'm starting a petition for hazard pay, or at least a cafeteria upgrade. Fizz laughed, the sound a balm to frayed nerves. I'm in. And maybe throw in a spa day for good measure. Drax shook his head, a rare smile ghosting across his lips. Count me out. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Threx chuckled, the weight of the world momentarily lifted from his shoulders. One step at a time, people. Let's survive first, then we can argue about the perks. The station's alarms blared once more, a reminder that the universe wasn't finished with its cosmic game. But the crew was ready, armed with wit, courage, and an unshakable will to survive. As Threx surveyed his team, his family, he knew they would find a way, because in the end they were human. And humanity, with all its flaws and follies, never backed down from a fight. All right, let's do this, Threx said, his voice steady and sure. For Earth, for us. And with that, the crew plunged into the fray once more, united against the odds, defying the universe with every fiber of their being. The shield shimmered, a beacon of defiance and hope. They would hold, they would endure, and they would laugh in the face of the cosmos for as long as it took. The station's control room was buzzing with a kind of frantic energy you'd expect right before everything goes to hell. Captain Threx stood in the middle of it all, trying to look like he had some kind of master plan instead of a massive migraine. He watched his crew, his mismatched group of misfits, juggle the impossible task of keeping Earth's last hope from imploding in spectacular fashion. All right, folks, Threx said, clapping his hands together as if trying to summon some enthusiasm. Let's see if we can pull a miracle out of a hat that doesn't exist. Jenkins, elbow deep in console wires, snorted. A miracle? How about a stiff drink? I'd settle for a stiff drink, or a lobotomy, Fizz chimed in, eyes glued to her tablet. Because that's about what it'll take to keep us from losing our minds at this point. or losing what little remains, Drax added with a grunt, still standing sentinel by the door, arms crossed like a bouncer at a nightclub for the damned. A sudden beep interrupted their moment of collective self-pity. Jenkins, who'd been about to make another probably inappropriate comment, frowned at his console. Captain. You might want to take a look at this." Threx moved over to Jenkins' console, peering at the screen. It was a mess of data, the kind that would give a mathematician nightmares. But amidst all the chaos, something caught his eye, a flicker of hope as unexpected as a tax refund. "Is that?" Threx trailed off, disbelief coloring his tone. "Yup," Jenkins confirmed, a nervous grin breaking through his usual grim expression. "Looks like we've stumbled onto some ancient Earth tech. Could give us the boost we need to stabilize the shield and maybe even patch up the wormhole network." Fizz raised an eyebrow, skepticism practically radiating off her. "Forgotten tech? What are we talking about here? A relic from when humans still thought disco was a good idea, you wish," Jenkins replied. "No, this is something even older. Back when Earth thought nukes were an acceptable party trick." Threx straightened, a sense of urgency creeping into his bones. "All right, we've got a potential solution. But we're going to need to execute fast. Fizz, think you can figure out how to integrate that tech with our current systems?" Fizz tapped her tablet, the holographic blueprint of the station flickering into view. "Give me a minute and I'll have us a workaround. Though I make no promises on style points. Good enough for me," Threx said, turning his attention to the rest of his crew. "Drax, Jenkins, start pulling up everything you can find on the station's archive about this tech. We need to know what we're dealing with." Drax nodded, a rare look of focus in his eyes. "I'm on it." Jenkins gave a mock salute. "Aye, Captain." Diving into the dusty depths of human stupidity we go. As the crew sprang into action, the control room filled with the sound of frantic fingers tapping against consoles, the hum of machinery, and the occasional curse word when something inevitably short-circuited or sparked. Threx stood at the heart of it all, a conductor on a runaway train trying to keep everything from derailing. "I need everyone on their game. This is the Hail Mary of Hail Marys, people. If we screw this up, we're toast." "Burnt toast," Fizz corrected absent-mindedly, already lost in the tangled web of schematics before her. Threx grinned despite himself. "Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather not end up as cosmic crumbs." Drax shot him an amused glance. "A bit optimistic, aren't we, Captain? Call it what you will," Threx replied, his gaze flicking back to the holographic display of Earth. "But I'm not ready to quit just yet." Jenkins' voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Cap, got something here." He motioned Threx over, pointing at a line of text on his console. "Found an old blueprint. Looks like the tech is based on a rudimentary form of what we use now. Should be compatible with a few tweaks." "All right," Threx said, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. "Let's get to work on those tweaks." The crew moved with renewed purpose, driven by the tantalizing thought that they might just pull this off. Threx watched them, a bizarre mix of admiration and exasperation swirling within him. It was like trying to herd cats through a burning building, but somehow they made it work. Fizz, engrossed in her task, muttered under her breath, "If we pull this off, drinks are on me." "No promises on quality, though." Jenkins chuckled, his hands dancing over his console. "I'll take it. Beggars can't be choosers, especially in space." Drax, focused on the ancient tech data, shook his head. "How did these people survive without blowing themselves up?" "I think the answer is barely," Threx replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But their stubbornness paid off in the end. Let's see if we can channel a little of that magic." As the minutes ticked by, the control room was a hive of activity, each crew member a cog in the barely functioning machine. The station shuddered occasionally, like a giant complaining about a bad back, but it held together just. Cap, Jenkins called out, an edge of excitement in his voice. "I think we've got it. The modifications are ready." Threx felt a jolt of adrenaline, the kind you get when you realize the roller coaster doesn't actually end in a plunge to doom. Fizz nodded, a rare smile breaking through her usual sarcasm. "We're as ready as we'll ever be. Time to roll the dice." All right, Threx said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. He moved to the main console, his hands hovering over the controls. A deep breath, a moment of silence, a prayer to whatever cosmic entity might be listening. Engaging the tech now, Threx announced, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The station rumbled, the lights flickering ominously before stabilizing. The crew held their breath as the ancient tech kicked in, a cascade of energy rippling through the system. Shields stabilizing. Jenkins reported disbelief mingled with relief, and the wormhole network showing signs of life. Threx exhaled, the tension in his muscles easing slightly. Good. Let's keep it that way. Fizz was already adjusting the power flow, her fingers a blur. We've got a window, but it won't last long. We need to make sure the shield holds and the wormholes stay open. Drax moved to assist, his expression a mix of determination and wariness. We'll need to monitor it closely. Any fluctuations could send us back to square one, or square -5, Jenkins added, a sardonic grin on his face. Threx nodded, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. Earth, still battered and bruised, but safe for now. It was far from over, but they'd taken a step in the right direction. All right, folks, Threx said, his voice a rallying cry. We've got a chance. Let's make sure we don't squander it. The crew nodded, a silent promise shared in the confines of the cramped, ozone-scented control room. They'd pulled off a miracle, but the real work was just beginning. Fizz tapped at her tablet, her focus razor-sharp. I'll monitor the shield. Make sure we're not on the brink of another collapse. Drax, Jenkins, Threx ordered, keep an eye on the wormholes. I want to know the second anything changes. The two men nodded, each settling into their roles with the ease of seasoned soldiers. They might have been out of their depth, but they were damn good at treading water. Threx watched them, a sense of pride mingling with the ever-present anxiety. They were a ragtag bunch, but they were his ragtag bunch, and against all odds they were still in the fight. All right, Threx said, his tone lighter, almost teasing. Let's get this done. I've got a date with a bottle of something strong once we're through. Jenkins chuckled, eyes never leaving his console. I'll bring the glasses, Captain. Fizz smirked, the glint of mischief in her eyes. And I'll make a toast. To humanity, stupid, stubborn, and somehow still kicking, here, Drax added, a rare softness in his grizzled voice. The control room settled into a rhythm, the dance of survival less frantic now, more deliberate. The crew worked together, a well-oiled machine held together by duct tape and sheer willpower. Threx glanced at the holographic display, Earth's image flickering but steady. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they had a fighting chance, and sometimes that was all you needed. As the minutes stretched into hours, the crew kept at it, determination etched into every line of their faces. They joked, they cursed, they worked, and slowly, ever so slowly, the station's systems came back to life. Status report, Threx called out, a hint of hope in his voice. Fizz glanced up from her console, shields holding steady. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're not lost in them either. Jenkins nodded, his expression lighter. Wormholes are stable. We've got a connection, at least for now. Drax folded his arms, a small smile playing at his lips. Not bad for a bunch of misfits, eh, Captain? Threx grinned, the gesture genuine and full of promise. Not bad at all. They'd done the impossible, or at least the improbable. But as they settled into the uneasy calm, Threx knew the journey wasn't over. The universe was still a dangerous, unpredictable place, and they were only a few missteps away from chaos. But for now, they'd won a small victory, and sometimes that was enough to keep fighting for. The control room buzzed like an overworked microwave, a symphony of stressed-out engineers and outdated tech. Captain Threx stood in the center, a human lighthouse in a sea of chaos. His gaze bounced between his crew and the holographic display, which flickered like it was powered by wishful thinking. Earth spun in its usual unworried manner, completely oblivious to the wormhole network, and S.H.I.E.L.D. holding its cosmic cul-de-sac together by metaphorical duct tape. Fizz was hunched over her screen, a digital sorceress trying to conjure stability from chaos. "Captain," she drawled, "if this tech was a horse, it'd be glue by now." Her fingers danced over her tablet, weaving a tapestry of technobabble that could either save or screw them. "Keep that glue talk to yourself, Fizz," Threx muttered, eyeing the display. "We need to keep this rusty bucket floating, not sink it." Jenkins, elbows deep in a panel of wires that looked like a rat's nest, piped up. "I swear, if these wires were any more tangled, I'd be calling an exorcist." "What kind of sadist designs consoles like this?" Drax grunted from his station by the door, his perpetual scowl deepening. "Probably the same kind who thought deep-fried Mars bars were a good idea." "Focus, people," Threx snapped, trying to sound like the adult in the room. "We've got a wormhole network to stabilize, not a culinary debate to settle." Jenkins snorted, a noise like a balloon deflating. "Tell that to my stomach. It's been protesting with every meal since we boarded this tin can." Ignoring the banter, Threx turned back to Fizz. "How are we looking?" She glanced up, eyes glinting with skepticism. "Our shield is about as stable as a politician's promise. But for now, it's holding." "Fantastic," Threx replied dryly. "Let's keep it that way." Drax's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Incoming meteors." Looks like they heard we were having a party and decided to crash it. The holographic display lit up with red blips, each one a potential harbinger of fiery doom. Threx felt his pulse quicken, a reminder that the universe had a sick sense of humor. "All right, folks," he barked, rallying his crew. "Let's show these space rocks what for." Jenkins on targeting. "Fizz, keep that shield steady." "Drax, watch our six." "Aye, Captain." Jenkins replied with a mock salute, fingers flying over his console like a pianist at a recital no one wanted to attend. Fizz muttered something about a fool's errand but kept her eyes glued to her tablet, the station's schematics shifting like a kaleidoscope. Drax, ever the stoic security blanket, shifted his stance. "Ready when you are." The control room was a blur of motion, each crew member a cog in the chaotic machine. Threx watched, half expecting the station to shudder apart at any moment. Instead, it held together barely. "Meteors incoming," Jenkins announced, his voice tinged with excitement. "Time to see if these old guns still pack a punch." The station's weapons roared to life, sending streaks of energy slicing through the void. Threx watched the display with bated breath, a spectator at the cosmic shooting gallery. "Direct hit." Jenkins whooped, pumping a fist in the air. "Take that, you overgrown space pebbles," Fizz snorted. "Congratulations, you scared a bunch of rocks." "Let's hope the next batch isn't smarter." Threx grinned despite himself. His crew might be cobbled together from the galaxy's misfits, but they had their moments. "Status?" he asked, the question more habit than necessity. "Shields holding," Fizz replied, though her expression suggested she wouldn't bet her last credit on it. "For now." "Wormholes are stable," Drax added, his gruff voice a comforting constant. "But I wouldn't put my faith in them just yet." "Good enough," Threx decided, though he knew their reprieve was temporary. The universe was an unpredictable beast, and they were just fleas clinging to its back. As the control room settled into a tense rhythm, Threx allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd been through hell and back, cobbling together solutions out of spare parts and sheer stubbornness. It wasn't pretty, but then, nothing worth doing ever was. "All right," he said, drawing the crew's attention. "We've got a breather. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Jenkins pulled himself from his console, stretching like a cat. "I'm ready for a drink, that's what I'm ready for." Fizz shot him a look. "You get us through this, and I'll even find you something that doesn't taste like engine fuel." "Promises, promises," Jenkins quipped, returning to his station with a grin. Drax, ever the pragmatist, scratched his chin. "We might want to run diagnostics on that old tech. Ensure it doesn't decide to give up the ghost halfway through." "Good idea," Threx agreed. "Let's not tempt fate more than we have to." The crew nodded, their focus sharpening as they returned to the task at hand. Threx watched them, pride and anxiety warring within him. They might be a ragtag bunch, but they were his ragtag bunch, and together they'd done the impossible. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the control room ebbed and flowed like a tide. Each crew member was a cornerstone, holding up their part of the crumbling edifice they called teamwork. Cap, Jenkins said, a little too casually for Threx's liking. "We've got company. Ship on the horizon, and it's got the look of someone who didn't get an invite, friendly or unfriendly," Threx asked, already knowing the answer. In space, any ship you didn't know was best assumed unfriendly until proven otherwise. Jenkins glanced at his console, his brow furrowing. "Looks like a Reaver class. Best case scenario, they just want to sell us something overpriced and underwhelming. Worst case." Threx prodded, though he didn't need to hear it. "They want to blow us to bits and sell the scrap." "Charming," Fizz muttered, her tone as dry as the Sahara. "And here I thought today couldn't get any better," Threx sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, let's not panic just yet. Jenkins, hail them, see if they are in a talking mood, and if they are not," Drax asked, his hand straying to the blaster at his side. "We improvise," Threx replied, hoping his voice didn't betray his nerves. Jenkins worked his console, the hail signal spiraling out into the abyss. "Reaver-class vessel, this is Captain Threx of the Earth Defense Station. State your business." A pause, the kind that stretched like a rubber band, and then a voice crackled over the comms, smooth as silk and twice as oily. "Captain Threx, pleasure to make your acquaintance. We're just traders passing through." "Traders, huh?" Fizz whispered, rolling her eyes. "And I'm a space princess." Threx ignored her, keeping his tone neutral. "What are you trading?" "Oh, the usual," the voice replied with a chuckle. "Information, supplies, the occasional miracle cure for what ails you." "Generous," Threx said, skepticism lacing every syllable. "And what's your price?" The voice hummed, a sound like a cat toying with a mouse. "We prefer to negotiate face to face." "Why don't you invite us aboard?" Jenkins glanced at Threx, eyebrows raised. "Sounds like a trap." Threx nodded. "Probably is. But we need intel, and they might have something we can use, or they could be pirates," Drax pointed out, his voice a gravelly reminder of reality. "True," Threx agreed, his mind racing. "But pirates don't usually ask nicely. In my experience, they don't ask at all," Jenkins added, not quite joking. Threx considered their options, the weight of command a familiar burden. "All right. We'll let them dock, but we stay on high alert. Fizz, keep the engines hot. Drax, take Jenkins and keep an eye on them. And someone please remind me why I ever wanted this job. Glutton for punishment, maybe." Jenkins offered with a grin. "Something like that," Threx said, steeling himself for whatever came next. As the Reaver-class vessel maneuvered into docking position, the control room's tension ratcheted up a notch. Threx watched the holographic display, the ship's outline an ominous silhouette against the star-studded backdrop. The airlock shuddered open, revealing a trio of figures who looked like they'd stepped out of a bad space opera. Their leader, a tall, wiry man with a grin that could cut glass, stepped forward. "Captain Threx," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Don't mention it," Threx replied, forcing a smile. "What can we do for you?" The man spread his hands, a gesture that might have been genuine if it weren't so rehearsed. "We're here to offer a mutually beneficial arrangement. You have a problem and we have the solution." "You now?" Threx said, his skepticism on full display. "And what might that be?" The man's grin widened, a shark smelling blood. "Information, Captain. The kind that could save your little station from a rather unfortunate end." Threx felt the crew's collective gaze shift to him, silent questions hanging in the air. He weighed their options, the clock ticking down to chaos. "All right," he said at last. "Let's talk." The man's grin never faltered. "Excellent. I think you'll find our terms quite reasonable." Threx hoped that was true, but he wasn't holding his breath. In space, survival often hinged on doing the impossible with nothing. If they were lucky, this would be one of those times. As the crew settled in for what promised to be a contentious negotiation, Threx felt a flicker of hope, a tiny ember in the void. They'd faced long odds before, and they'd come out the other side stronger for it. No guarantees, he thought, but then again, life never gave guarantees. Only chances. And for now, that would have to be enough. The docking procedure ended with a metallic thunk that reverberated through the station, like the universe itself just dropped a particularly unwanted parcel at their doorstep. Captain Threx stood near the airlock with his crew, each of them wearing expressions that range from wary to just plain annoyed. They weren't expecting anything good to come from this meeting, and they weren't likely to be disappointed. The airlock door hissed open, and there stood the trio of so-called traitors. Their leader, a wiry man with a smile that made Threx want to punch something, preferably him, stepped forward. He looked like the kind of guy who'd sell you snake oil and assure you it was the cure for what ailed you. "Captain Threx," he said, that grin never leaving his face. "I'm Vec, and these are my associates. We're very pleased you've agreed to negotiate. Let's get one thing straight," Threx replied, crossing his arms over his chest. "We're not negotiating. We're talking. Talking comes first." "Negotiating is what we do when we don't have blasters pointed at each other," Vec chuckled, a sound as sincere as a politician's promise. Of course. We're just here to offer a helping hand." Jenkins leaned over to Threx, whispering louder than necessary. "More like a helping hand into our pockets," Threx smirked. "So, what's this miraculous information you've got for us?" "I assume it's something we can't live without, indeed," Vex said, gesturing for his associates to produce a small data slate. "We have intel on a new wormhole network that's opening up. It could be crucial for re-establishing Earth's connections with the rest of the galaxy." "Convenient," Fizz piped up, eyes narrowing. "And I suppose you just stumbled upon this info while taking an innocent trip through the cosmos," Vex shrugged, still grinning. "Information has a way of finding us. We're blessed that way." Drax, standing like a living monument of skepticism, snorted, more like cursed. "What's the catch? Let's just say we'd like a small investment," Vec replied, his voice oily enough to lubricate an engine. "Something to grease the wheels of cooperation." Fizz rolled her eyes. "Great, just what we need. Space grifters playing good Samaritans." "How much?" Vec leaned in, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "A modest sum." "We're not unreasonable modest," Jenkins asked, eyebrows raised. "You mean like a kick in the head is modest?" Threx sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We'll have to discuss this with the rest of the crew. In the meantime, you're welcome to avail yourself of our hospitality. Try not to touch anything important, of course," Vec replied, unfazed. "We'll be here when you're ready to talk specifics." As the traders were led away under the watchful eye of Jenkins and Drax, Threx turned to Fizz, his expression a mix of frustration and determination. "What do you think?" he asked. Fizz shrugged, glancing at the data slate Vec had left behind. "Could be legit, could be pure nonsense. Either way, we're in a tight spot and they know it." "Wonderful," Threx muttered. "What I wouldn't give for a simple day." Fizz chuckled, humorless. "In this line of work, simple days are as rare as honest politicians." "True enough," Threx said, feeling the weight of command settle once more on his shoulders. "Let's get to work. We need to figure out if they're selling us a miracle or a mirage." The control room hummed with subdued tension as the crew worked through the traders' data. It was the kind of atmosphere that made Threx wish for a stiff drink, or several. There was a time when space exploration was an adventure, full of wonder and excitement. Now, it was more like trying to herd cats on a roller coaster. Captain Jenkins called out, eyes glued to his console. "I think we've got something. The data checks out. At least it looks like it does." Fizz peered over his shoulder, her expression skeptical. "Looks can be deceiving. Let's not start celebrating just yet." Threx nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. "All right, let's assume for the moment they are telling the truth. What do we need to do?" Fizz sighed, pulling up schematics on her tablet. "If this new network is as they say, we'll need to adjust our systems. It's doable but risky." "Risky?" Jenkins asked, looking up with a grin. "I love risky. It's the only way I get my kicks these days." "Just try not to blow us all to hell," Threx quipped, though he couldn't hide a hint of a smile. "I'd like to keep breathing if it's all the same to you." "Can't make any promises," Jenkins replied, already lost in the arcane spells of engineering. As the minutes ticked by, the sense of urgency deepened. The control room was a hive of activity, each crew member a cog in the machine of survival. Threx watched them work, a swell of pride mingling with the ever-present anxiety. Cap Drax's voice broke through the hum of activity. If we're gonna do this, we need to keep those traitors on a tight leash. Agreed, Threx replied. Last thing we need is them getting ideas, or getting their hands on anything they shouldn't, Fizz added, tapping away on her tablet. Threx nodded, knowing full well the risks they were taking. But that was the game, wasn't it? A constant bet against the odds, hoping the universe didn't decide to collect its due. All right, he said, drawing his crew's attention. Let's keep this ship from falling apart for a little longer. And Jenkins, yeah, Cap. Jenkins answered without looking up. Once we're done here, drinks are on me. If we're still alive, that is. Jenkins grinned, finally turning to face his captain. I'll hold you to that, Cap. The work continued, a testament to human ingenuity or perhaps sheer stubbornness. They were a ragtag bunch, but they had a knack for pulling off the improbable. And if they couldn't, well, they'd go down swinging. It was the human way. As the Iors dragged on, the control room became a pressure cooker of anticipation. Everyone was on edge, the stakes higher than they'd been in a long time. Threx could feel it in the air, a tension that was almost tangible. Eventually Jenkins straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. All set, Cap. Ready to give it a whirl, Threx took a deep breath, nodding, all right. Let's fire it up. Everyone brace for impact. Literally, Fizz watched her console intently, ready to pounce on any sign of trouble. Here goes nothing, she muttered, fingers flying over her keyboard. The station shuddered as Jenkins initiated the sequence, the ancient technology humming to life. It was a patchwork of old Earth tech and newer components, somehow cobbled together into a functioning whole. Status? Threx asked, his voice taut with anticipation. Shield stable, Fizz replied, though her eyes remained glued to her screen. For now, wormholes are holding, Drax added, his steady presence a rock in the storm. Jenkins whooped, his fingers dancing across his console like a maestro. Hot damn, we did it. Threx allowed himself a brief smile, though he knew better than to relax completely. The universe had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. All right, let's not get cocky, he said. We've got the data and we've got the connection. Now we need to keep it. The crew worked on, each of them hyper-focused on their tasks. It was a familiar dance, the dance of survival. And as the minutes ticked by, the station held together, stubbornly defying the odds. Eventually the tension began to ebb, replaced by a cautious optimism. They'd done the impossible, or at least what had seemed impossible Iors before. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Status report, Threx requested, leaning against the console with an air of forced nonchalance. Fizz smirked, tapping her tablet, shields holding steady. No signs of imminent failure, wormholes are online, Drax confirmed, his voice a gravelly reassurance. Looks like we're back in business. Jenkins punched the air, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Looks like we live to fight another day, Cap. Threx finally allowed himself a genuine smile, a rare commodity in the void. Good work, everyone. Drinks are definitely on me tonight. About damn time, Fizz said, stretching her arms above her head. I was beginning to think we'd never get a break. As the crew wound down from the adrenaline high, Threx took a moment to reflect. They'd faced long odds and come out the other side battered but unbroken. It wasn't pretty, but then nothing worth doing ever was. Cap, Jenkins said, leaning against the console with a grin. You ever think about retiring? You know, somewhere quiet, Threx chuckled, shaking his head. Retire, and let someone else have all the fun. Not a chance. Fizz rolled her eyes, though she was smiling. You're a glutton for punishment, Cap. But I guess that's why we keep you around. Damn right, Threx replied, feeling the weight of command lift ever so slightly. Now, let's get this place back in order. I'd like to enjoy a drink without worrying about space rocks crashing the party. As the crew dispersed, their laughter and banter filling the control room, Threx allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd reconnected Earth with the galaxy. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was perseverance, or maybe it was just sheer, stubborn human spirit. But whatever it was, it felt good. And in the vast, unpredictable expanse of space, that was worth celebrating. No guarantees, no promises, just chances. And for Threx and his crew, that was enough. For now, they were still here, still standing. still laughing in the face of the universe's cruel jokes. And that, as far as Threx was concerned, was a victory worth savoring.